Okay, I'm here with Christopher Johnson with Green Bench Brewery, downtown St. Pete. And one of the most unique things about this brewery is, to me, the Fodder. The Fodder is a big wooden vessel. And go ahead and explain what this thing is and how you use it.
Sure. So Fodder's, like you mentioned, it's actually an old Dutch word that just means big oak tank, big vessel. So completely made out of wood versus the rest of our fermenters inside the brewery are made up of stainless steel, and so that's the traditional sort of I guess material used for fermenters, especially in this sort of modern brewing era, if you will. So Fodders themselves are kind of old world. They're not really used much anymore. Not many people use wood in the brewing process other than sort of aging and stuff. And so this will allow us to, what we use it for, it allows us to ferment some of the styles that we're pretty passionate about, really yeast forward, fermentation forward brands, beers like Saison, farmhouse ales, those kinds of brands. We actually ferment them 100% in oak versus in stainless.
So the whole thing is made out of oak?
Sure, yeah, exactly. They're big.
Is there a
oak
particular
vessels.
kind of oak it's made out of?
Yeah, so we have two Fodders. We have a 25 hectoliter, which is like roughly 20 barrels or so, 19 barrels, which is just about 600 gallons or so. And then we have a 90 hectoliter, which is roughly 75 barrels. So we can brew 5 batches of beer into that one to fill it up. The bigger one is all American oak. The smaller one is actually a blend of French oak and American oak. The real differences between the two, because they're all fairly neutral when we got these Fodders, as far as their flavor profile, is sort of the density of the wood. It allows an ingress of oxygen, sort of slow breathing, and that's actually why we originally got the Fodders, because we were trying to create what I believe saisons are, or at least an element they should have. For me personally, is kind of a sense of place, if you will, kind of that sort of lambic term. But I think it also applies to saison, where you sort of have a house character. And so we purchased the Fodders in order to begin building a house character. And if the way we do it is we actually keep the Fodder, or keep our culture of yeast in the Fodder since the day that we first pitched it. So
every batch you make carries on to the next batch.
Exactly. So we never cleaned the Fodders once after we did our first pitch.
Wow. So yeast and everything's gonna kind of carry on and continue to ferment, and
so basically, I mean, they'll ferment out the wort, make the beer, and then they begin to take on their own character, this house culture, this characteristic that you can't get anymore from just pure cultures. For example, if you were to order this yeast, the same yeast that we use from breweries that we got them from, or from labs that will propagate these strains, it won't taste the same as what comes out of our Fodder, because we're almost 50 generations in at this point. We're almost 3 years old. And about 50 generations in with this strain that's really taken on its own unique character. And the way in which we did that was, the only way that we knew that we'd be able to get that high in generations and keep the yeast healthy and viable is if we gave the yeast its own just sort of like world, its own environment.
Wow.
So we allowed the yeast to live in this thing and be the only dominant species of any microorganism in the Fodder. So we plate lab all the time. We still run lab. There's sort of that new world element still involved with this old world technique.
Sure.
And the only things that we have living in there are still those original strains that we pitched. But I guess there's something else to just add. We like when people explore, try new stuff, have an open mind, especially when you come to a brewery like ours, because we often try to do things that are new to a lot of people. And so we also try to provide as much as possible in the form of brands that we're passionate about and brands that we're fans of, in things like we post a festival every year called Fodder for Thought. And the concept there is to explore some of these fermentation-forward beers, not necessarily beers that are in Fodders.
Is there any, since you're brewing a separate system with the Fodder, is there any danger of contamination with the? I know Brett gets crazy, and I'm sure your yeast is crazy. You got to keep it contained. Is that correct?
Yeah. We it's definitely a concern, but we have a pretty good hold of it. We just run lab. We from the day we opened, the first time we ever pitched Britannomyces, which was right away, we were dedicated to quality, and that meant investing money and time and people into our lab in-house. We've had that since the first day, and we've yet to have a Brettanomyces cross-contamination ever in the history of the brewery, which is saying a lot because we use the exact same equipment, same hoses, same pumps, same bright tanks, same packaging equipment, and we just clean really, really well, and we wait until lab tells us that everything's gone, dead before we move forward.
So the two main things, sanitation and lab work. Lab work to me is seems to be the key on a lot of brewery success. When they have a great lab, they have a great brewery. Not all the time, but I mean, I've seen, there's a couple breweries that don't have a lab at all, and they're still successful.
Right, that's true.
All right, well, I think that's it. He's heading to the airport, so we got to get him out of here. And cheers, everybody, and we'll see you in Miami.
Cheers.
So.